play.
Hi, I'm Mike Papantonio, and this is America's Lawyer. New studies have confirmed that the majority of Americans are drinking toxic tap water every single day. And most of the contaminants can be traced back to 3M and DuPont. Tonight, we'll discuss these new studies and tell you about the dangers in your own tap water. Also tonight, a Maryland police officer is charged with executing a detainee that was handcuffed in the passenger seat of his police cruiser. But the details have emerged that he wasn't wearing a body camera and that the officer had already killed a man almost a decade ago. And later in the show, the FBI discovered a disturbing facility in Alabama that's been targeting children to arm and train them as violent extremists and terrorists. Don't go anywhere. America's Lawyer starts right now. New studies have been proven that American citizens have been drinking tap water that's been poisoned by DuPont and 3M and other corporate giants. Joining me to talk about this is Farron Cousins from the Trial Lawyer magazine. Farron, you know, I tried the first C8 cases ever tried in America up in Ohio. But now we're finding that that was really the tip of the iceberg, right? 3M is involved, DuPont's involved. This is a huge story that's just started to evolve, isn't it?
Right. These chemicals that they're finding in quite literally all of the water across the United States, except for a few different locations, is contaminated with chemicals called PFOAs and PFASs. And what these are those microchemicals that you found in the creation of C8 with DuPont and 3M. And they get into the human body. They wreak all sorts of havoc, cancers, liver failure, fetal problems, and they stay in the body. Biopersistent is what they call them. They stay in the body. They build up over time, causing all these problems. And, you know, a couple years ago, it seemed like, all right, this is a major problem for DuPont and 3M because they poisoned the Ohio River Valley with this. But this case actually got people wondering how widespread is this? And now we're finding it's everywhere, and it's not just these companies. These are two of the biggest and baddest.
Okay, 3M developed it.
Right.
Okay, the documents that I used in trial in the DuPont case that was tried up in Ohio River Valley showed that 3M saw, they did a series of monkey studies. In the monkey studies, virtually, well, all of the monkeys died. Every monkey that they put in contact with these products died. It was so bad that 3M made the decision, we're not going to make this stuff anymore. Of course, this is after they put billions of gallons all over the world. It's already in the water system. It's already in the environment. But then they say, well, we're going to stop making it because the monkey studies show that this stuff will kill you. It also showed, 3M also knew, that once it's put in the environment, it stays there for at least 1 million years. So let's say we can clean up the drinking facilities all over this country. It never goes away because the next rain, the next storm that comes on, it again contaminates the facilities, right?
Right, and the latest study shows that you probably would not be able to find a person living inside the United States right now, today, that does not have a detectable amount of PFAS or PFOAs in their body. I mean, this thing is so prevalent, they're finding it in polar bears that live in remote regions that have never seen a human being in their life. It's in their bodies too, because it's in the oceans, you know, it's in the runoff from the streams, and it gets in the fish. It's everywhere, and it is absolutely killing people.
Okay, now, we put this case in front of 5 juries so far. Every one of the juries has said, yes, it's dangerous, yes, it will cause cancer. It doesn't just cause cancer, it causes birth defects, it causes gastrointestinal issues that are life-threatening. This is very bad stuff. So here's where I land this story. If there's people out there that are in charge of water facilities, in other words, people's drinking water is determined by that person who's in charge of a drinking facility. They know exactly, they do the testing, and if they're finding C8 in their drinking water, and the standards of 70 parts per trillion is ridiculous. The very manufacturers of this product said that 1 part per billion, not per trillion, 1 drop per billion will cause these physical issues. To give you an example of what that is, that's one drop inside an Olympic-sized swimming pool. That's the people that used it and made it. They said that's what scares us. If it exceeds that, we're going to have a problem. So this story's just started.
Well, and you talk about the water supply systems and the people in charge of that. The only area they tested where they didn't find any of these chemicals was in an area, Meridian, Mississippi, because they had dug their water wells down over 700 feet.
Right.
That's how far you have to go in the environment, 700 feet straight down, to not get these chemicals in.
And now DuPont and 3M, they want taxpayers to clean all that up. We're not going to let them do that. We're suing them all over the country. We've got attorney generals that are bringing lawsuits. We've got people who are running water facilities that are bringing lawsuits to make these companies that are responsible pay for making the water right again. A new company called NewsGuard says that they can protect you from fake news. But the corporations funding that group have real different motives. This is an amazing story. Lay it out for us. This is such an extraordinary story. I go, really, this is happening in 2020. Go ahead.
Well, it starts with a very well-respected guy, Steve Brill, started Court TV,
Yeah.
was a great lawyer.
I wouldn't go that far. But anyway.
Decides he wants to help fight fake news, very noble cause. And so he says, well, in order to fight fake news and create NewsGuard, I'm going to need some money. So he goes to this group called Publicus Group. And it turns out that Publicus Group is funded, in part, a lot of their money, billions of dollars, is coming from healthcare companies, from pharmaceutical companies. The very companies that control the corporate media have now paid in a couple $1 million to help Mr. Brill found this NewsGuard app plugin, I guess, for your browser, that's now going to tell you when you go to a website, oh, NewsGuard says this is fake, or NewsGuard says this is a green light. We approve of what's on this site.
Let me comment two things about what you just said. Brill has always been a corporate lawyer. He's never done anything for consumers. I mean, really, whatever he wants to sell, the guy is center of corporate America. These are the people that Mr. Brill and this company went to try to get funding for this. Follow me. Eli Lilly, Abbott, Roche, AstraZeneca, GlaxoSmithKline. I mean, it's a lineup of the worst offenders of defective pharmaceuticals in the country. Now, what is going to happen is when we do a story like this, if you were to go to NewsGuard, right? NewsGuard would tell you, don't go to that site because they're telling stories that are fake news. This is not fake news. This is absolutely. Fortunately, you had a great writer that's handling this story, who's done all the investigation, and he says, look, if you believe the ratings that NewsGuard gives, then you're kidding yourselves. You're kidding yourselves about the truth of the matter.
Well, NewsGuard has already rated RT. They say RT is fake news. They say Daily Kos is fake news, according to NewsGuard. Breitbart, Daily Caller. So it's left, it's right, it's everything that doesn't fit into NewsGuard's narrative,
which is pro-corporation.
Right, of what news is. If it's not New York Times or Washington Post, it's not real.
Right.
But right now, investigative journalism is not taking place at these traditional media outlets. It's taking place with these independent outlets that NewsGuard says, sorry, you're fake.
Yeah, if it's not corporate, if it's not pro-pharmaceutical, if it's not pro-chemical, if it's not pro-Wall Street, then it's fake news. Now, what about the idiot who says, yeah, I'm going to use this? What about the idiot who says, I'm going to use Snopes? Snopes is the same thing. You've got some cat with a clear agenda that's saying, don't go to this site because they're not telling the truth. No, it's don't go to this site because they're saying things that are scaring the bejesus out of us. Because the corporate backing on this is deplorable. So if you want to believe Pfizer or you want to believe an independent source, they're saying, oh, you can believe Pfizer, Dow Chemical, DuPont, Boeing, McDonnell Douglas. You can believe them. But don't believe that side.
Well, see, with Snopes, I disagree with this author's assessment of them. I think that's inaccurate what he said about them. But with the NewsGuard, this is absolutely, the funding has been traced. You see it in the documents. This group got money from a group that gets their money from these healthcare
which hasn't been proven by Snopes. But who wants an organization like Snopes making that decision for you, right? The Farmer Bro Martin Shkreli has been accused of price fixing in a new lawsuit. Farron, what's the new lawsuit about? This guy's always in the news about doing awful things. That's how we can know that it's a big story.
He truly is. And, Shkreli is currently serving time in prison for fraud. And a lot of people don't realize that. They think he actually went to jail for, increasing the drug price a couple 100,000 or 1,000% in a single day. He's in prison right now for securities fraud. He ripped off wealthy people. But this new lawsuit from the FEC and the New York Attorney General says, okay, we actually finally looked into your Daraprim price increase, and we think we've got a price fixing case against you because you locked out the generic, you refused to let them come to market. That's what this lawsuit is saying.
A very common thing for all of the companies.
Well, exactly. That's the punchline of all of this. Is that, Shkreli's a bad person. But Shkreli, aside from the securities fraud, hasn't done a single thing that every other drug company in this country doesn't do on a regular basis.
Okay, we've done so many stories on price fixing where I don't care what the company is, whether you're talking about Merck, whether you're talking about Johnson & Johnson, all of them. Their price gouging is uncontrollable. Now, we had a chance to do something about it, if you remember I guess it was during the Obama administration, where we were going to make it to where we could import from places like Canada.
Right.
And then Cory Booker led the charge against that, and so we're stuck with the same kind of, what is it? You've seen situations of 10,000% markup on some of these drugs, right? The drug we're talking about, I think, was $7, and now it's like $750.
Yeah,
the Shkreli drug.
Right. The Daraprim. And again, though, actually, just at the beginning of this year, so we're talking 4.5 weeks ago, you had every major drug company go ahead and announce their price hikes for 2020. There was no reason to do this. Some of these drugs have been on the market for 25 or more years. They just wanted to make more money off it, and that's what Shkreli did. It's dirty, it's deceitful, but everybody else. Right. We can pick on this guy because
he's in jail.
Oh yeah, look, he's the scapegoat for the pharmaceutical industry. He wasn't one of the boys.
Yeah.
He came in with lots of money, bought a company, said, "I'm going to do what everybody else is doing," and he gets popped for it. Meanwhile, your CEOs of Pfizer and Merck and Eli Lilly, they're still going out and
every day.
It's insane. They do it all the time. They just did it earlier this year, but Shkreli's the only one who gets popped for it.
Yeah, that's par for the course. Coming up, a Maryland police officer is facing a murder charge after shooting and killing a man who was handcuffed, and he was arrested in the officer's squad car. But why wasn't he wearing a body camera? And what's all this talk about a second killing by that same officer? That and more when we come back. In Prince George's County, Maryland, Corporal Michael Owen Jr. is being charged with second-degree murder for shooting and killing William Green, who was arrested and handcuffed in the passenger seat of the officer's squad car. It turns out Corporal Owen was not wearing a body camera during the incident, and the same officer had actually eluded a murder charge back in 2011 for killing another man. Former D.C. Metro Police Officer Ronald Hampton is here to walk us through this. Ronald, we've seen the media swarming with stories about police accountability. Corporal Owen wasn't wearing a body camera at the time, and he shot and killed this handcuffed detainee. Does this incident speak to the failure of the police department? And I got to tell you something. Let me preface it by saying this. As I read this story, I thought back to a wonderful movie. It's called Serpico. And it was when there was corruption within the police department, with the detective department, and people were being shot left and right because they wanted to be kept quiet. Has that issue surfaced here?
Well, I think it's a known fact that Prince George's County Police Department has been having problems for some time now. They've been under federal investigation. The Justice Department has been in there. And so this has been going on for a very long time. So I do think that there are some basic cultural issues as it relates to the police culture in the department. But it's a failure also on the part of the leadership of not only the police department, I feel, but the county, in the sense that you can't have 80 police officers wearing cameras when the whole force needs to be wearing cameras. And it just, that is something that they all have to share in the responsibility of, because they claim they just didn't have the money.
Yeah, Ronald, this was an execution. Okay, this wasn't a police shooting. Let's call it what it is. It's an execution.
Oh, no, I agree.
Is sitting inside the police car with his hands behind him. And it just leads me to so many stories we've seen around the country where you have a police department that's somehow involved with either drug trafficking or some type of illegal activity. They make arrests. They end up taking that person out in arrest because they find out that they're somehow connected to an issue that might uncover that. As I read this story, to me, again, if there had been any notion of a reason, I'd say, maybe that kind of thinking would be far-fetched. But this is an execution.
Yeah. Oh, no, I agree.
What's your take?
Oh, no, I agree. I happened to be in a meeting the day after the shooting with a retired former captain from the Prince George's County Police Department, who also happens to be Hispanic and the president of the National Hispanic Police Officers Association. And we were talking about this. This was an execution. And there was no way that they were going to get out of this. And you can't put a handcuffed person in the car, front or back seat, and then shoot him 7 times and then claim that somehow or another you all was in an altercation. That's crazy. That is just pure crazy. But like I said, there's a systemic issue of the culture of the department as it relates to these kind of shootings. This has been going on a long time.
Ronald, how many years were you in the police business? I mean, you managed police departments, 24 years. You managed officers. You saw every iteration of bad policing. You, as a matter of fact, the history I know about you, corrected some of those problems when you were in that business of policing.
Yes, sir.
So just why is it so difficult for police departments to train officers to properly use body cameras, first of all? I don't think this was a mistake. I think it was intentional.
Right.
As a former police officer yourself, what complications are there? I mean, it protects the police officer to use a body camera where I can't make accusations like this. If this was an execution,
right,
and then there's more to the story, right?
Well, what we have known, what we have come into to information of is that body cameras on the part of police officers have helped them just as much as it has helped the public. So there's no excuse. The department should be outfitted throughout the police department, not just a small segment of those officers. But this is a problem that they inherit, that they say they had because they didn't have the money to buy the cameras. Well, that's no excuse. And anytime you have that problem, then you're going to also have the problem that this officer is facing and that the police department is facing. It's not just the officer, it's the police department. But there's a systemic cultural problem in policing that is also part of the training. See, I don't believe you can retrain people who you train to do something wrong in the first place. And part of the problem is the structure of policing as it relates to the training of how we do it. So we teach them how to shoot and all the other things that they do, and then we also teach them how to cover their ass. Well, if you're going to teach them the right way, then why you had to teach them to cover their ass? Because then they'll be doing the kind of things that they need to do. So they don't have to worry about covering their butt because they haven't done anything wrong. But that's a systemic problem that's found. The foundation of it is in the training and the culture of policing. And it's not just PG County, that's across the country.
Now, Ronald, you were in this business a long time. You trained a lot of police officers. You found a lot of corruption in the process of training. I want to follow this story with you. I want to see if I'm right or wrong.
Okay.
This was an execution, and the story goes a lot deeper than that. Ronald, thank you for joining me, okay?
All right, thank you.
In a startling report, the FBI discovered a plot of land in Macon County, Alabama, was being used as a training ground to turn kids into terrorists. Pretty unlikely story, but I have Molly here to talk about it. Molly, this story, this is all discovered by accident. These folks were driving to New Mexico, right? They had a room, they had the car full of people, full of kids. It overturned. The police officer that did the investigation found guns, found reason to investigate what was going on in Macon, Alabama. Tell me this story. It's a crazy story.
So it's a group of 5 individuals. They're family members, essentially. The main guy is Sarah Wahaj, and they're also connected to a compound, a similar type compound in New Mexico. So the one in Macon County, Alabama, is something like a military-style, sort of a makeshift obstacle course, if you will, and at that compound, they saw some training facilities, although no attack was ever carried out. But this Sarah Wahaj, his 2 sisters, his partner, and a couple of other people, they were actually living in New Mexico. So they were dividing their time. I'm not entirely sure the details there, how that worked out, but they ended up being arrested at the New Mexico compound in 2018 because they were looking for, police had gotten a tip that Wahaj's 3-year-old son, who'd been reporting missing by his mother from Georgia, they'd gotten a tip through the grandfather, who's actually a leader of an imam in New York, and he's well known. And
it all ties up to the imam in New York.
Yes,
right?
but he is dissing, if you will. He is not supporting what his son or his other children were doing. So he's saying now he's waiting for all the evidence to come out. There's a trial coming up on what they found, coming up in April on what they found.
Let's talk about that. What they found is a training camp for terrorists.
And it looks like they spent the majority of their time in New Mexico, but both of those facilities are being used for that. They found notes detailing what their attacks were. They wanted to attack schools. They wanted to attack law enforcement. They wanted to attack military. They even found text messages where they were putting out the word to others to say, hey, come join us if you're interested in committing deadly violent attacks, jihad, you name it. So it was clear that was their goal, but you do have some other strange twists.
Well, let me put one of those twists. The people they were training were children.
They were their own
They were
kids.
training their own
11
kids. One
children.
child they found the remains of that obviously had been killed somehow.
That was the one that was reported missing.
Right.
Epilepsy. The dad took the child from the mom. He and the girlfriend were praying the devil out of this child instead of giving this child their seizure meds.
Okay, but this the unique thing about this wasn't to train adults.
No.
This wasn't to train the imam in New York to blow himself up.
No.
It's always train the kids to go blow the kids up. I'm going to sit back here and preach about the evil empire, and I'm going to send kids in to blow themselves up and kill infidels.
That's right.
So that's what was being. That's the unique thing about this. This is a little different from ISIS in many regards, with the training camps look different.
But the evilness is the same.
No, the ugliness is the same, but this is particularly ugly in my mind because the focus was to train children.
That's right, because they were malleable.
Children as young as 8 years old to strap bombs on themselves, go into stores, go into schools, go into law enforcement.
Well, and military-style training to shoot as well. They were using these shooting ranges to do that. They were also malnourished. The entire living conditions were squalor, apparently. So they're facing federal charges of basically planning attacks on Americans, including law enforcement and military, as well as kidnapping related to the death of that little boy. And some firearms charges as well, because they did find a stockpile of weapons as well out in New Mexico. So they're still investigating connections.
The question is, are there more facilities like this that they're looking into?
Right.
Molly, thank you for joining me, okay?
Thanks, Pat.
Finally tonight, some good news. Facebook has agreed to a settlement of $550 million after the company was sued for illegally harvesting facial data of its users. This data was taken and stored by the company without the user's consent or knowledge. This lawsuit was about to head to trial in Illinois after the Supreme Court refused to grant Facebook's request to halt the trial. So rather than facing the possible $35 billion in liability the company projected, they decided to settle. Facebook is not the only tech company harvesting your personal data. Amazon's been harvesting biometric data through their Ring brand of security cameras and sharing it with law enforcement. Other social media outlets have been harvesting your biometric data, which has been stolen by hijackers in massive data breaches. The bottom line is that these tech companies have violated our privacy rights in their data scraping, and the only way to put an end to it, to hit them where it hurts. That's the only thing that's going to change it. That's to hit the profits. Until then, everything you put on social media is going to be used by these companies to make a quick buck. That's all for tonight. Find us on Twitter and Facebook at facebook.com/RT America's Lawyer. You can watch all RT America programs on DirecTV, channel 321. Also stream them live on YouTube, and be sure to check out RT's new portable app where you can watch all of your favorite shows. I'm Mike Papantonio, and this is America's Lawyer, where every week we tell you the stories that corporate media isn't permitted to tell because their advertisers won't let them. Have a great night.